Hi everyone. So this is another one of our artist interviews for Lockdown Slop, which is an online exhibition alongside a printed publication where we've got 5 artists whose work we're featuring, and we're also doing content online like these interviews. I'm George and this is Hazel, and we are the co-founders and curators of Slop. Lockdown Slop has been very kindly supported by Norfolk County Council and the East Anglian Art Fund. So without further ado, we'll get into our artist interview today.
So today we're interviewing Nicky Deeley, who is a performance artist inspired by myth, psychology and history, who creates characters inspired by folk horror and the occult. Hi, Nicky.
Hi.
So could you tell us why you use performance and costume as a medium?
I actually came to it quite late. So I started making drawings and sculptures and then eventually developed into costume when I realized I wanted to get inside a sculpture and move around. I was like, I wonder what it feels like. And I really enjoyed it. And I think it was the act of masking, which, it's a really traditional act. It comes from drama, it comes from ritual, and it comes from basically getting the chance to stop being you and to start being part of the story. And that's why I like it. So it's either myself getting into a costume that I've made, and I tend to make them like drawings or like sculptures themselves so they can exist by themselves.
Yeah.
But then they've also got another life and I can get into it, or somebody else can, and they can kind of start making the story animated, and then they can return and they can go back to sculpture. So it's got this nice life cycle, which I really enjoy. But also it's a lot of fun. I find that, when you're an artist, you're always chasing the flow. So you're chasing that flow state of time slows down. I'm not thinking about myself or the world or anything. I'm really just resonating with these things that I'm collecting around myself and being with. And I find that when I get inside of a costume and film it, that's when that flow state happens. And I could do it like all day, man. I could do it all day. It's like pressing record and then going around the other side of the tripods and like moving around and seeing how that feels and getting into it and then going back and checking the footage. That's my sweet spot. And it's such a rich history to pull from, like internationally and historically, all the beautiful costumes and the reasons for making them. Why do we want to be part of a story? It's an unending sort of research well that I can get into.
Yeah. So do you exhibit those costumes like on their own?
Yeah. So what I quite like is having so if there's an installation, and then the installation can have the costumes displayed alongside drawings, maybe alongside the projected films of the performance, but the performance can happen, live or at another date. So, and often I'll end up unpicking things and reusing them for something else. So there's, again, like this life cycle, everything can kind of feed in to each other. And even the films, like, they'll change every time I show them. I'll hack it up again and re-edit it and show another kind of, because I think of them as being quite alive. I don't like leaving them sort of flat and dead and finished. I like keeping them going.
That's nice that you can kind of create this whole world by doing that, by having all the different elements there. It's not just like one film, it's like everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite, like I did a show at the Sainsbury Centre in Norwich and had 4 performers none of those performers had performed before, not in a costume like that. And they were quite extensive with prosthetics and huge wigs and huge capes and foot prosthetics and arm prosthetics. It was quite elaborate. And they were all quite nervous, never having done that before in front of, the public. But when they put those wigs on as the finishing touch, it's like they had to lean forward, put the wig on, and then flick their head back. And when they flicked their head back, every single one of their eyes did this thing where they just changed. And they became someone else. And they told me afterwards, wow, that was awesome, because I got to be not myself. And their personalities changed. So the shy one, my shy friend, was really out there and quite hardcore. And there was some of them were vocal, that were usually quiet, some were usually quite loud, and they were, it was just really interesting. They would be the opposite. So it was a way of channeling something different, and that's pretty neat to see.
Yeah. No inhibitions if you're know who you are.
Yeah, exactly. You can get away with a lot. Yeah.
I've just been feeling that. I felt that way a little bit at the start of coronavirus, when we were putting masks on for the first time, and just the feeling of anonymity and the kind of confidence that you get from that, even just going into Morrison's, in a mask.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing how clothing and costume can have such a significant effect on your confidence and your behavior and your personality, as you say.
Absolutely. It acts as a kind of almost like a membrane to something else, and maybe it's something else in you that doesn't get to, part of psychology, it might be your shadow self or something that then gets to come out.
So with Slop, and obviously with Lockdown Slop, we like to focus on rural areas. That's both kind of our audience, getting people from rural areas to view the art, but also with our artists to work with artists who work in rural areas, who have some connection to the countryside. So I know you've got quite a strong connection to the Norfolk countryside with your work. So how do you feel about the art scene in Norwich and in Norfolk, and what kind of challenges or advantages have you had being based in East Anglia?
So I lived in London and studied in London for 13 years or so. So I was kind of used to that model, and then coming to Norwich was for Outpost Studios, because it was amazing that there was the ready-made community already there. So when you have a studio structure, you're going to meet other artists, there's going to be a cross-pollination, there's going to be social events. And because you have those the opportunity for chance meetings in the hallway or whatever, you're going to end up sharing ideas. And that's what I wanted, is chance meetings, but with a kind of rural setting. So the reason why Norwich was because of Outpost. And I think it was sort of getting used to it. It's a different kind of way of doing things, which isn't based around the white gallery space, which you spoke about before. It's to do with DIY. It's to do with making work for sometimes more creativity's sake than for your CB. Sometimes I feel that it's London or the big cities, it's a bit obsessed about what have you done and what have you got coming up.
Definitely. Especially when people ask you that question, what are you working on for?
What are you working on? What have you got coming up?
And if you don't have anything, that's so intimidating.
It's very intimidating, and it's your creativity is based around that. It's what have you got coming up? And I found that really quite boring and very limiting, and I didn't feel that so much in Norwich. And I think with Norfolk as well, it's really exciting when work is shown outside of the town, and it's like shown in a small village in someone's barn, and you all drive out there. And I actually found it really supportive. Like if someone chose to do something creatively, the audience was there. People would make the effort to come, and that's amazing. It wasn't the same sense of kind of camaraderie and support in London. I guess it was more competitive.
And
yeah.
more like career based rather than art based, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of comparing it to other careers someone might have with other promotions and milestones, whereas art isn't really like this linear path so much. It's more about
absolutely.
exploration.
Yeah. And I think, like we were talking about before as well, as like rural spaces and having that space, like physical space to experiment, and the ease of transition from like being in the studio in Norwich and then taking the works out to a river was not a drama. Like it was easy. And like to be able to just go, well, I'll just try that. I don't know what's going to happen when I make the sculpture. And then I take my underwater camera and then I swim with it and submerge it and film it while it floats away. I can do that in a day. Like it's not something I need to plan for like a month ahead of time and hire a van for or whatever. And that I think, and get permission and all of that kind of thing. And what if it fails? It doesn't work, and then I've wasted all that month or whatever. It's like it just made me braver, and I think it made my work better. Because I wasn't afraid to fail. It was all just like super fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit when talking about creativity for creativity's sake, and maybe the difference between the art scenes in London and Norwich. But what role do you think artists have in society? Is that different from people working in other areas?
You know what, because I think of artist as a really broad spectrum now. Like I don't think of art as just artists making work for galleries. That's one section, but I include all of creativity within that. So someone who's making cross stitch at home, or is joining the spinning circle in a local hall, or is writing their own poetry in their bedroom, or learning to DJ or something, that's all in it. I guess for me, like the role of the artist is expressing experience in a different language that can't be expressed in another way. So science can't do it. Like sometimes verbally you can't articulate, the language just isn't enough, it's insufficient. And art provides that, and it provides meaning on a personal level for doing it, personal meaning, but also if you make an artwork that resonates with someone, and even, you know, if from the simple level of I enjoyed that, to the really, really, you know, sort of like a deep level of that has personally changed me, or has led me to look at something else differently, or helped me. It's like there's such a, like, there's so many shades to it. And I think people forget that. It's like they always it's like artists get a really bad rap. I think from lots of people, you know, it's like there's always the few that are holed up and they're like, oh, they're just very self-indulgent, and they maybe get these big budgets and they do these silly things, you know. And it's like, well, that's one very small section. Like there's a huge amount that it gives to humanity, because you're looking at it into thinner section. Do you see what I mean? Like,
yeah, and definitely I think especially when in some cases that's such ridiculous sums of money involved, that's when resentment comes in, obviously. For a lot of
and
people.
that's because that's the bit that's visible, but you know, like I don't know, like I said, like the spinning group, like that's really important. And craft and drama and dance and theatre, and, you know, songwriting, like it's all the same thing.
Yeah. I think the opportunity as well for someone to actually make something, whether it is like dancing and physically making a performance, or if it's making any object, it's so valuable. And it's kind of, you don't often get to do it unless you are kind of a craftsman in your job. There's hardly any jobs anymore where you do actually get to produce something, and I think it can give you quite a lot of kind of emotional impact, kind of self-esteem.
And it can be that, like, you know, a successful art career, what is a successful art career? It's been sold for a very long time that success is you have it for your full-time job, people pay you loads of money for your ideas, and you can buy a house and go on holidays, and like you've got enough money to keep going. Do you know what I mean? And curators say that you're great.
Yeah.
And people collect your work. But you know what happens, are you a successful artist if you have to have a day job your whole life? You know, and you do it at nighttime, but you've always done it at nighttime, and you work in the evenings, and you make time in the weekends, and you show work to your friends, and your work develops. That's successful, right? But it's always like, it tends to be like, I don't know, there's so much emphasis on kind of almost the consumerist capitalist end of art making.
It's the result, isn't it?
The result, like, what if, again, like, where have you shown and what have you got coming up now, like all of that.
I think what you said about the effect on a viewer, like if one person enjoys looking at it, just likes it, say, oh, that's cool, great. I think that's so underrated. You're actually making someone's day a bit better. Why? That's amazing. That's such a good thing to do.
It's given them a moment, like a strange moment where they pause within their daily life to get this one special moment that doesn't quite fit but feels meaningful. Like, and it's funny though, because the feedback loop for art making, not for music but for most art making, is really slow. So like, you know, if you make something great, you can have someone come up and say, oh, I loved what you did the other time, and it's like, oh wow, that was 4 years ago. Like, I heard about that earlier, but but there's room for everybody, man. There's room for everybody. It's without sounding too hippie, but
No, absolutely. Okay, and as we mentioned before, kind of in your introduction, you're inspired a lot by the occult and folk horror we've talked about before. So we were just really interested to know, obviously with living in Norfolk and exploring the countryside, whether you'd come across any Norfolk myths or folk tales, and if they'd had any influence on your work, or just you just like the sound of them.
I mean, I wouldn't even just stop at Norfolk, although there's like the one site that we spoke about before, the Warham Camp, the Iceni ring fort, that I can't, when I visited it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I do have a big thing for standing stones and Neolithic kind of artifacts and things. And I love museums. I love regional museums and small bespoke, almost like hobbyist collectors. Like, I love all that. There's in Sheringham, there is a very small museum, which is my utter favorite. I think it might be my most favorite museum in the whole world. And it's called the Peter Coke Shell Museum. And have you been?
I think I have. Maybe, carry on.
I'm going to send you pictures. It's so amazing. So he was an actor in London, and he, in the, I want to say like 40s and 50s, on the stage, and he moved up to Sheringham and he collected shells, and then he would like arrange the shells in architectural models, but the models are like, imagine Versailles but in shells.
Wow.
And each building. It's like these palaces, and they're so ostentatious, but so delicate and lovingly made.
Oh.
And they're in these huge cabinets, and it's just amazing. I love it. It's very small. And I really want to work with them one day.
That sounds good.
I want to make a character, like a costume, and then shrink myself down to like live in one of the palaces and do something there. I don't know.
Wow.
But it's amazing.
That was great.
And you don't get that kind of, well, you do get small museums like that in big cities, but there's something different about it. It's just, yeah, it's magical.
Have you heard of the Witch Bottle Museum in Durham, I think, or Swaffham, somewhere around there?
Yeah, I have. I haven't been though.
No, I haven't been, but it looks like, I think it might just be in someone's house, maybe,
Yeah,
or something like that. It sounds really
even
interesting.
better.
Oh, well, sorry,
but
go on.
I was just going to say, like the folk rituals in, because I'm from New Zealand, so coming to the UK, and the folk calendar customs in the UK are just amazing. So like, you know, the different it might be like the Obios festival in Cornwall, or the tar barrel rolling festival. It's like there's all these different things, and they often involve like handmade costumes, and that, and the fact that there's this like historical lineage based around it, that just, it's amazing. The history of, yeah, sort of the UK is just incredible, and it really soaks into my work, I think. And it's unending. It's just like an unending resource to tap into. Very exciting. Yeah.
Was it the Eel Festival you went to?
The Eel Festival. I would recommend, if you go.
It sounds like you'd like that.
The eels, they and I hope I'm getting this right, anyone can correct me. The eels migrate from Ely to the Sargasso Sea by Mexico. And the Eel Festival happens, I think, when they return back from that's where they go to spawn. Is that the right word? They go to breed anyway. And it's a fantastic day out. There's a big kind of almost like you know, like Chinese New Year, where they have the dragons, but they do an eel, one of those.
No, they don't do that.
There's a fantastic custom where the town crier has to go around every pub in Ely and test whether the beer has gone off or whether it's good. So he obviously does that by drinking a pint and then shouting that the beer is good at the end of it. So I think when we saw him, he was quite a few pubs in.
It's a little bit
taking his job serious. So yeah, that's another. Yeah, but it's what you're saying. There's so many different and very specific kind of local customs.
Yeah.
There's such a diversity of them. Like
and that's art making. That's creativity. Like. And that sense of community and passing down that creativity from generation to generation. Like, someone's going to make the costumes, someone has to, like, somebody invented the story, they're participating in the story, keeping it alive. Like, yeah, oh, wonderful. I'm totally, as soon as this finishes, you know, I'm on Google, man. Googling the Ely Festival. Yeah.
Well, listen, Nicky, this has been really nice to chat with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to the interview, and thank you so much for having your work as part of our project. So thanks to everyone for watching. Obviously, check out Nicky's art in Lockdown Slop on the online exhibition, or obviously in the publication, and go find Nicky online as well. But yeah, we'll sign off there. Thanks so much, Nicky.
Wicked. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.